The first chapter of Hebrews is really built around Psalm 110:1. In fact, you might say, as commentators have, that the whole of the book of Hebrews is an exposition, an elucidation of Psalm 110:1, that the Lord speaks to Messiah Lord to sit at his right hand, waiting, as Hebrews 10 says, I think, in the latter part of Hebrews, waiting until the kingdom comes. His enemies are put as footstool under his feet. But in Hebrews 1:10 there's a verse which has been used to reverse what I've been suggesting. That is, that Jesus was the founder and the creator of the Genesis creation. Now, he's certainly a co-coordinator and co-creator, one might say, with the Father in the new creation. There's no question about that. He's working with God the Father in the new creation. But that he is the creator in the Old Testament is really amazing. Repeatedly the Bible says that God was alone at the creation, particularly Isaiah 44:24, that nobody was with the Father at creation. And Jesus himself said, "You, Father, made them male and female. He made them, not myself." And in Hebrews 4:4, the very book we're discussing, it's the Father that rests at creation, not Jesus. So the idea of Jesus being a pre-human, non-human, prehistoric, pre-existent second member of the triune God is a tremendous stretch when applied to the New Testament documents. It's a later development. The writer to Hebrews is quoting Psalm 102. Now, a complication arises immediately, which it's impossible for those with an English Bible to even examine properly. The Hebrews writer is not quoting from the Hebrew Bible, from the Hebrew text of the Old Testament as we have it translated into English. He's quoting from the Septuagint, the Greek version. The whole psalm is messianic. It's looking forward to the time when God will restore Israel, when he will build up Zion, and when he will appear in majesty, and all the nations of the earth will fear God in his Messiah. It's a kingdom, a future kingdom passage, clearly. So when the Septuagint translators, probably around 200 or 300 BC, came across this passage in Psalm 102, they were puzzled by what the Hebrew might mean. And if you point it one way, you have a meaning, God weakened me. Somebody is praying to God in that psalm. He, God, weakened me. If you point it differently, you alter the sense entirely. And you have, he answered him. This is simply a fact of the Hebrew language, that according to the way you put the vowel points in, you can alter the meaning totally. And so the Septuagint was reading there, he, God, answered the one who has been praying to God in the rest of this chapter, Psalm 102. Now that gave good reason for the Hebrews writer to quote a messianic psalm in favor of the Son. And as we read on in the Septuagint, not the Hebrew Bible, so you cannot check this in your English version without going to the Septuagint, we'll find that the whole reference is to God speaking to the man who's praying. And God is there talking about the end times. And if we then want further proof of this, that the reference in Hebrews 1:10 is nothing to do with the Genesis creation, we have only to go to Hebrews chapter 2, verse 5, where the author himself says, it's the world to come about which we're speaking. The whole reference is to the future. And that makes perfect sense because Psalm 102 is all about the future creation. And if one needs further support, one has only to go to Isaiah 51, verse 16, where you find God putting his words into somebody else's mouth, the Messiah, his agent. And he's telling this agent, the Messiah, to found a new world, to plant a new world, a new order in Palestine. That makes perfect sense. Now that actually is a very common Old Testament theme in Isaiah, where we have all sorts of material about the future founding of Zion at the hands of an agent who is not God, but his agent, the Messiah. For example, in Isaiah chapter 51, we have this wonderful statement and commentary from the Word Biblical Commentary itself. Yahweh, he says, referring to verse 15 and 16 of Isaiah 51, Yahweh introduces himself again, but this time in terms of his control of the raging sea. He, Yahweh, addresses the one he is using, an agent that is, putting his own words into his agent's mouth and protecting him very carefully. The purpose of this care is to allow him, the agent, to plant heavens and earth. That makes no sense, says the commentator, if it refers to the original Genesis creation. A similar phrase in this vision has become a standard way of describing Yahweh's work in creation. It uses the word to stretch out and also the word to plant in this case. In other instances, God is the one acting alone, as to say in the Genesis creation. But here we have God using his agent. Heavens and land, in Isaiah 51, verses 15 and 16, refer to the political order in Palestine, of course. Now that's what the Hebrews writer in Hebrews 1:10 has in mind, citing Psalm 102 from the Septuagint version. We have a very parallel situation to the one I was just referring to in Isaiah 51. So it's a very great mistake to suddenly reverse all of that and say, no, he's referring to Jesus as the founder in Genesis, namely the creator of heaven and earth, which would contradict everything else said about Christ and God in the New Testament.